Coming up on the next edition of Power in Politics, a major shakeup in the race for the White House as President Biden steps aside and Vice President Harris steps up. Also, how does this latest development affect the race for the White House in Florida and those important ballot amendments? Hello and welcome to another edition of Power in Politics. I'm your host, Frank Cipolla. Power in Politics is a weekly, unbiased look at the top stories affecting the state with a special emphasis on the psychology behind the decisions and issues that affect our lives. I want to welcome my weekly co-host, Emmy Award-winning political psychologist, Dr. Bart Rossi.
Great to be here again, Frank.
Well, we've had another week of big news with some major developments in the race for the White House, including, of course, news that President Biden is out of the race and has endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. So let's discuss first the president. Right. You've worked over your career with those folks who might be elderly and are coming to the realization that they've lost some cognitive and maybe even physical abilities.
Yes.
What's it like to make a decision for a gentleman that old?
Well, I think that what the president has been struggling with is denial, which we see in a lot of older people. They think that they can do more than they can actually do. And I think Biden was struggling with that. And he came to the realization that maybe he is getting older and he's not quite as sharp as he was, and he should pass the torch. I think it was a real personal conflict, like an approach avoidance conflict that a lot of psychologists always talk about. When you're in a conflict situation, it brings on a lot of stress, and he showed that he was really under stress. And then there's another factor here, Frank, in terms of psychology, okay? With older people, sometimes they don't look sharp, as per Biden and the debate. But a lot of times when they're older, they make things up as they go along. They tend to lie more. They tend to fabricate. They make things up that don't make a lot of sense.
This must be also depressing for him. He's worked his whole life to become president of the United States. Now he has the position, and he has to give it up when theoretically he thinks he can continue on.
It doesn't mean, of course, that he's inept because he made this decision, but he's obviously suffering from some cognitive issues, and people can see it. It's reality.
Okay, now you mentioned a moment ago, we have somewhat of an age issue still in this race,
right.
And the age issue is now that the former president, Donald Trump, is 78 years old, and he's running against someone who's 59 years old, or the presumptive Democratic nominee.
Yes, and what Biden did was take age off the table, okay? That's the psychology.
Not completely.
But now the age is on the Republican side. And what I'm saying, a lot of people may look pretty good in some ways, but they tend to exaggerate, lie more, fabricate, and they tend to just make things up as they go along because they're not thinking quite right. And we're seeing some signs here that the former president is not looking too good. And the polls suggest that. Most of the polls did not want either one of these candidates. Mm-hmm. And why? Because people see things in both of them.
Now, I'm big on optics and body language,
right.
And I'm not a psychologist like you, but I noticed that after the attempted assassination of Trump, he seemed to have a different demeanor. Am I correct? Am I the only one that saw that?
No, I think you're correct. There's some post-traumatic issues there. Everybody has to go through that whole thing about, well, I came within a fraction of an inch of dying. Mm-hmm. And it does change your perspective. It provides some shock and some internal issues. Sure, yeah.
So he still, for lack of a better description, has somewhat trauma from this, as anyone would.
Anyone would, sure. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Kamala Harris for a moment. Does this change the race nationwide and specifically the women's vote? Because that was one problem that I think the president had, President Biden, as well as the African-American vote and the suburban vote and so on and so forth. Does this change the dynamic of the race, and in what way? Because we now have the potential of having a woman president.
I think Biden actually was suppressing the vote. He was suppressing the Democratic Party and independents. People kind of liked him. They knew that many people think he's a good guy, but they also think that he's a problem going forward. And now I think you're seeing with the new candidate that she looks capable, and a lot of people are now becoming energized. And now we have a very energized rather than a chaotic Democratic Party. And that party now is against the Republican Party that has to figure out what to do.
We have about 30 seconds. I'm sure that folks watching the show have had a relative who you understood has had cognitive issues. You maybe had to take the keys away from the car and so on and so forth. That in 20 seconds was probably what we were looking at with President Biden. I think his family probably knew that.
Not as sharp as he used to be, and a question mark. And that's one side of cognitive issues. The other side is, as I just said, that some people just don't make sense. They start saying things. They don't answer the question that you ask them, and they fabricate and they move on.
Which we did see.
Yes,
which
we
did
saw
see.
that.
Okay,
yes.
Time now for one of our regular segments, a commentary from Dr. Bart Rossi we call the Rossi Rant.
And Frank, we've talked about this before, and I'd like to bring it up now since we have a new candidate, and that is the traits and characteristics of a winning personality, a la Reagan, Bush, and Bush, the guy that he would like to have a beer with, okay? And of course, Clinton and Obama, a great speaker. But what do these people have in terms of traits? And I always say, you know, they're comfortable in their own skin. They don't try to be somebody else. They want to be who they are. You know, they're consistent. They're not flip-floppers, you know. They always reach out to other people, everybody. And they're very, very good listeners. I feel that if Kamala Harris projects herself as a winning personality and wraps herself around the issues, she could be a winner.
We have an interesting race, and it was different even a week ago.
Yes.
And we will have a lot to talk about as the election continues.
We will.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. Coming up, how will Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket affect how Floridians vote on some consequential amendments? That's next on Power and Politics. Welcome back to Power and Politics. I'm Frank Cipolla, joined by political psychologist Dr. Bart Rossi. Even if she is not elected president, Kamala Harris introduces a totally new dynamic to the presidential contest. And that shakes things up a bit in the Sunshine State as well, starting with Amendment 4, which would lengthen the time a woman has in the state to have an abortion. So Amendment 4 is on the ballot.
Right.
We have a woman or a potential woman at the top of the Democratic ticket. Does that bring out more women who might vote in favor of Amendment 4?
They will be much more engaged. They have a younger candidate. People can rally around her. And I think it's going to make a big difference. And she's not only going to appeal to women, but she's very articulate in saying that why should we have government come in and govern women? It's just not making a lot of sense for some Republicans as well as Democrats and independents. She's going to say this very clearly. I thought Republicans were for less government. I'm for less government. That's what she's going to say, especially when it comes to women. And
book bans as well.
And book bans and some of the other issues that are out there. But this one on abortion and this amendment, she's going to really project. And I think it does enhance the possibilities to put Florida into the purple zone.
We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Of course, this is the first time where we'll need 60% approval to get an amendment passed. It used to be 50%, now it's 60%.
Well, that's something I
really
really dislike that.
That's a different show.
Yeah,
okay. Also, will it bring out younger voters who might vote for Amendment 3, which would legalize recreational marijuana in the state? Your thoughts on that?
Again, I think that we're going to see more energy. We're going to have more younger people involved. There are going to be more volunteers out there and different groups. There are many, many different, hundreds, probably thousands of different types of political groups in Florida alone. And a lot of these people are going to be mobilized.
Now, you said the word a moment ago. You said the word purple.
Yes.
If we're led to believe by Governor DeSantis and the state legislature, which in both houses has a supermajority of Republicans, you're saying that Kamala Harris, if she's indeed at the top of the ticket, whoever she picks for vice president is yet to be seen, that Florida will be in play in some way, shape, or form?
I think it could be in play because you're going to have a lot of people mobilized. You're going to have Democrats really going in a certain direction with independents. And by the way, there are more and more independents in Florida than Republicans and Democrats. That's where it's going. So, yes, she has a chance to hit all those independents and make a big difference. It could work for her.
What is the psychology behind that? Are women more comfortable, not only in the state of Florida, but nationwide, voting for another woman?
If the issue is right.
Okay, explain.
And this issue is all about the government taking over control of a woman's body. That's the whole perception here. And that's why there are Republicans as well as Democrats and independents who don't like this abortion ban stuff. They really just don't like it. And the polls say that. And I think that it's a really winning issue for the Democratic Party. It's going to make a significant difference in the race.
You know, in retrospect, I don't think we've talked about this. Governor DeSantis pushing that through the state legislature, where the time to get an abortion now is 6 weeks,
right,
instead of 15. I think politically that was an error on his part. Maybe
I think you're right, and it's going to come back to haunt him and the party in this election going forward, because people have been hit by that and they don't like it.
Okay, we have a big race in Florida, as you know. We have Rick Scott running for re-election as a Senate candidate, an aspiring, maybe head of the Senate, majority leader. He wants that position as well. He's going against former Congresswoman Debbie Powell.
Right.
Again, we have a different dynamic than we even did a week ago, where we have the possibility of a woman at the top of the Democratic ballot. That has to help her.
She has to be the right person with the right message. And she doesn't have to be mimicking Kamala Harris, but she needs to present her own messaging here in Florida, and why she as a woman believes that the state government should not be taking over women and their bodies. She has to project that on her own and then embrace, you know, her views on the issues when it comes to climate change is a big issue here in Florida, and banning books, as you said, and all these other issues that seem to be very rigid here in Florida. If she does the right messaging, she can be very competitive against Scott.
Now, we've seen in the past, even in states like Kansas and Ohio, once abortion is on the ballot, it has passed, in some cases, overwhelmingly.
Overwhelmingly.
So you're saying that this is the key issue that Congresswoman Powell and Kamala Harris and so on should hammer away here in Florida?
Yes. And there's another factor. The whole thing that you mentioned before, it has to pass by 60%.
In Florida.
In Florida. There are a lot of people who are angry about that, including me. I think it should be 50%. I mean, suppose there's 58% of the people and 42 say you know, I'll go along with the ban. Well, that means that the minority is the winner and the majority is the loser. It doesn't make any sense. And a lot of people are mad about that.
And we also see in state government now putting roadblocks when they can.
Right.
And I predict that even if it is passed, we're talking about Amendment 4 that would lengthen the time a woman could get an abortion in Florida. I think it'll probably be challenged on the back end, even if it's passed.
But Frank, that will enrage people even more. So this is just not going down the right road. And I think you're going to get over 50% on this amendment issue. Will you get 60? That's a hard number to get to. But I think it's going to be very, very strong.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. We're going to take a break then. When we come back, we'll talk about weather, specifically who was in the sunshine and who got caught in the rain this week, as we present the always popular segment, Sunshine or Showers, when Power and Politics continues. Welcome back to Power and Politics. We've had some typical weather in Florida this month, sunshine here, showers there, but you never really know what you're going to get hour to hour sometimes. So with that as a setup, we see who was up this week and who was down in a segment we call Sunshine or Showers. Let's start with the sunny day. Who was in the sunshine this week for you?
Well, Frank, actually, I'm going to put the Florida legislature in the sunshine.
Oh.
And as much as we don't want too much government, okay, I think that in this case, what they're trying to do is limit, you know, social media access to minors, okay? And as much as I don't like a lot of government stuff intruding, I think it's necessary. There are too many psychological problems today with kids growing up. They're being bullied, you know, through social media. There are a lot of issues there. And I think that the right legislation could have an impact and kind of minimize some of these problems. It's not going to solve everything, of course, but having the legislature think about some of those limits associated with minors and social media, it just makes sense to me. So psychologically, emotionally, I think it will be a positive.
That bill has to be crafted just right, though.
It
because
does.
How do you monitor a child under 14 to see?
That's right. There are a lot of issues there,
Right.
but in terms of you know, how it looks, you know, as psychologists say, face validity, it makes some sense.
Oh, I never knew that term. Thank you very much.
And Frank,
Oh,
who do you have? Who's in the sunshine here?
it's always a surprise when you ask me, and I appreciate that. I'm going to put President Biden in the sunshine this week, and I'll tell you why. Let's take the politics out of it. Here's a gentleman who's been in government for 50 years. He wanted to be president. He ran in 1988, I believe 2008 as well. Becomes president. He's legally not required, but he can run for another term, and he steps away because he knows that he's not the man he used to be. It must be very depressing for him, but I think he did the right thing because Donald Trump right now will be the last probably candidate from the baby boomer generation.
Right.
Kamala Harris, if she gets the nomination on the Democratic side, is 59 years old. So this is really a handing off of the torch.
Yes.
Because,
Yes.
if Donald Trump should lose, then he's probably the last baby boomer presidential candidate. So Joe Biden doing the right thing. Props to him for stepping aside and allowing the next generation to take charge.
Yeah, and he took age off the table for the Democrats. And,
Exactly.
and he's throwing it out there now to the Republican
We have
Party.
sunny
Yeah.
days, you know that. 3 o'clock, it starts to rain. Who's in the showers?
Well, Frank, I have somebody who's really in the showers. It's most unfortunate, but it's really ugly, okay? And I'm talking about, of course, the star shortstop for Tampa Bay Rays, Wander Franco, who now is officially indicted for abuse, extreme abuse to a 14-year-old girl. He's a married young man with 2 kids, and he had a long-standing affair with a 14-year-old, and he paid off this girl's mother with money to keep this in process. He was like the star of stars in the major league just a couple of years ago. A brilliant rookie year, and to think that now he's going to be probably spending years in prison.
Wander Franco.
Wander Franco, yes, he deserves the showers. Yes,
I agree with you 100%.
And how do you have the?
Oh, who's in the showers? Is that what you're asking
Yeah,
me?
where you going with the showers?
I'm going out of state.
Okay.
I think Gavin Newsom is in the showers, not because of anything he's done, but he's probably the odd man out along with Ron DeSantis based on this latest election cycle. Let's say Kamala Harris wins. She could run again. That's 8 years before he can run. I know he had aspirations to run in 2028.
Right.
A lot of people did, and I think they've been iced out now. So Gavin Newsom.
Politically, he's in the showers.
Politically
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
showers.
I see that. Okay.
All right, thank you, Doctor. It's time for a break. When we come back, a commentary by yours truly titled, Let's Be Frank, When Power and Politics Continues. Welcome back. What we saw this week has not happened in more than a half century. An incumbent president deciding, in this case weeks before Election Day, not to continue his re-election bid. That decision upended what was an already complicated presidential cycle. 9 times in the history of our nation, a vice president has been asked to take over for the president. And while this is not like previous circumstances where we saw assassinations, death by natural causes, and a presidential resignation, it would seem time to take a moment to assess what kind of president Kamala Harris would be if, and again it's a big if, as anything could happen, she is elected. Past vice presidents have fallen into 3 distinct categories: either abysmal failures, like Presidents Tyler, Fillmore, and Andrew Johnson, caretaker presidents like Chester Alan Arthur, Calvin Coolidge, and Gerald Ford, and those who rose to the occasion, grabbing the presidency and making it their own. Teddy Roosevelt comes to mind. He was many things before becoming an accidental president. He left almost 8 years later with the executive branch transformed. He busted up large monopolies and created the model for the national park systems, among many other things. When Harry Truman was asked to run for vice president, he sent a message to FDR to go to hell. He didn't want the job. Eventually, he acquiesced and then expertly managed the post-World War II era. Today, he's consistently ranked as one of the top 8 presidents. Lyndon Johnson continued the policies of JFK, but arguably with the kind of political savvy and connections JFK lacked. Johnson created the social safety net we all now enjoy. So here we are with a relative unknown as vice president who could ascend to the presidency, and we have no real idea of how she will handle the awesome responsibilities of that office. And despite what candidates say, they really don't know what they are up against until they are alone in the Oval Office. Should she be elected, and again, a million things could happen between now and then, Vice President Harris will have the added pressure of being the nation's first female president. Just like those who wished former President Donald Trump well when he was almost the victim of an assassin's bullet, we also must now wish Kamala Harris well. not because of politics or policy, but because whomever wins, like it or not, will represent all of us. We'll be right back. That's it for this week's edition of Power and Politics. On behalf of my co-host, political psychologist Dr. Bart Rossi, and the fine folks working behind the scenes, thanks for joining us. As always, we'd like to know what you think. Visit us at powerandpolitics.tv or email us at info@powerandpolitics.tv. We'll see you again a week from now at this time and on this same station. Have a great week.